glad that we have this fabulous batch of panelists here today who have all not only been thinking and talking a lot about the future of the music landscape, they actually have influenced it in many ways. These folks almost need no introduction. I'm actually just going to run past them, and we're going to actually just start talking because they're almost universally known. It's Jim Griffin from OneHouse, Chuck D, musician, activist from Public Enemy, Tom Silverman from Tommy Boy Records, Ian Rogers from Topspin, Fred Von Lohman from Google, and Dina LaPolt from LaPolt Law. And the concept behind today's programming is about some of the predictions that have been made. There's many that have been made in the past that are sort of totally pointless to talk about in this context because, oh yeah, DRM's going to save us. I mean, those kind of things we all know have come to pass. But there are some that still exist today that are worth talking about. And I wanted the panelists to sort of riff on them as we can because there are assumptions made about the way that the music industry and the music landscape could change. There's hope in some of the models, but there's enormous challenges to some of them coming to fruition. And some people don't think it would be the best options in the future. Let's start off with kind of a big one. And we have other panels that are going to cover this in detail. But one of them is the concept that we are moving from an ownership society to an access society. And in the music context, that would be on-demand streaming models are the future. This means like people would stop purchasing music on a per-track basis or even a per-album basis, and they would have some sort of subscription model or potentially a locker where they keep their stuff, or potentially, all the music would be available online. There's a lot of different iterations, but the concept of on-demand streaming models are the future. I wonder if folks have some thoughts about that. Fred, perhaps? I know that Jim has thought about it. Jim, why don't you start us off?
Well, I think this is a battle between distribution and delivery. I mean, they will fight a battle the rest of our lives. As storage gets cheaper, distribution looks good. As bandwidth costs come down and bandwidth becomes more ubiquitous, delivery looks better. But make no mistake about it, they are in a battle, much as we see in supply chains throughout the world. Every time you see a warehouse or a wallet or a refrigerator, you're seeing an inefficiency. That's a sign of inefficient delivery. And that's what leads us to store things or cache them. So, over a period of time, as delivery becomes hyper-efficient, distribution loses that battle. But for a long time to come, distribution is going to continue to get cheaper and more convenient and easier. And if we had predicted that we'd be down to the size of an iPod Shuffle that was about this big, we'd have been shocked by that prediction. But I'll tell you, it's going to go further to where it almost completely disappears and is built into your eyeglasses or things that you carry with you. And so don't count distribution out. Mm-hmm. It's got a long battle ahead of it. But I do think that delivery eventually wins. Because it becomes a very trivial event to move a song. And really, we're already there. Just a few years ago, people were exalting about how there was so much network congestion because people were downloading so many songs. And now that's just so trivial that, of course, networks are focused on HD movies and not with songs. So as regards music, this battle, it'll go on the rest of our lives, but delivery does eventually win this battle. But that only comes once it reaches planes and every corner of the earth and at a flat fee and at a very low price.
Cars especially, right? I mean,
right.
But it's definitely going to happen. I mean, we're already, the notion that 5 years from now we're going to plug our device into our computer and transfer the files is ridiculous. So of course we're going to, the delivery over the air is imminent.
Right. So, Fred, well, how do you monetize that? I mean, pulling stuff down, the activity of doing that, yes. But how are we going to build a model around it? Fred, you got any idea?
I think the good news I agree with what both Ian and Jim have just said. On that score, I just asked people, how many people get their email now from the cloud, from either Gmail, Hotmail, Yahoo Mail, and how many people still use a POP client on their own computer that downloads all the mail. I mean, that's already happened for email. That's already happened for a lot of other forms of information. I agree with Jim. There's it'll take some time. I actually think in 5 years there might still be a surprising number of people who have stored music on a device.
I agree with Fred.
But 10 years, I'm totally with you. And I think where in that the things tip is a good question. I know I'm a subscriber of MOG, and the reason I subscribed to MOG, an online music on-demand streaming service, was not because I didn't have enough music at home. I have plenty of music at home. It was because I didn't have a good way to have all my music on my phone all the time. And I didn't want to be syncing and thinking about that. And so it was really the mobile, the promise of the with me in the car, with me when I'm out of the house, that got me to pay $10 a month. To listen to basically a lot of the same music I already have at home, or music I could have gotten from a download service.
Yeah, same for me.
The good news here is, in terms of monetizing, I think the gradual shift toward a more cloud-based approach ends up making monetizing easier. Because you have a certain situation where the consumer is probably going to be, touching the cloud regularly. You'll have an opportunity there. Obviously, I already pay. I hate to even think about what I pay Verizon every month. An extra couple dollars on that, really not a big deal, comparatively speaking. So I actually think this shift toward the cloud actually is a great news for monetizing and for, as Jim Griffin likes to say, making it feel free.
Consider neither, by the way, that Taiwan brings us a chip that holds all the music from 50 years,
Yes.
and we only supplement that chip.
That's the next conference.
Gotcha.
Tommy.
Glad I'm there.
So the question, you mentioned on-demand streaming
Yep.
models, and those aren't the only streaming models. Pandora is not on-demand
Right.
streaming model, and it's enormously successful, adding 60,000 users a day. 1.75% of all radio listening already is Pandora, and that doesn't even include Last.fm and Slacker and many more choices that will be coming. And traditional radio is passive listening. First thing you have to do is you have to look at people and their relationship to music. And we in the music business and in the music world assume that everybody loves music, but that's really not true. A lot of people don't give a shit about music. I mean, they don't care if they never hear music, it's there, whatever. They'd rather watch sports talk or weather. They just don't really care about music. And it's an enormous number of people. So to assume that everybody wants music and is willing to pay for it or even, go through a lot of clicks to get to it, in other words, an active act of selecting, Spotify or whatever to make a choice, they don't know what they want. They don't want anything. They know that they don't want anything. They would rather have it fed to them easily. So there's all a continuum of people's activity and need to have music in their life. So some people love it, some people tolerate it, some people really just would rather not have it. We have to understand that, and we never talk about this. We assume everybody is an active listener. So on demand, I think will probably be only for the most active listeners. You're driving your car, you can't select a song. You're going to go off the road. It's already a problem with texting and driving. It's going to be a more passive solution, but maybe a tailored passive solution like what Pandora is.
Right.
You get what you want, but you don't have to be making choices all the time. You want to go home, open a beer, turn on the TV and watch. That's what most Americans are. And we have to understand most Americans, not the really tech-savvy people who will do what Fred does, to put together the MOG thing and have it on their computer, which is on their so that they can get it to their phone and then Bluetooth it to their car. My God, that is such a minority of people. And in 20 years, that's still going to be a minority of people because people just don't want to be bothered. They're done with work. They just want to chill out and whatever it takes. And that might be listening to sports or listening to music. So we have to understand, how do we make it easy, simple? And that's what Pandora has been enormously successful at.
Right.
And I actually think.
Just some numbers to
Yep.
back up, Tommy. I was just pulling this up. For those who haven't seen it, Warner Music did a great slide deck to the FCC that's available online. It's public. They did a bunch of research, and it exactly bears out what you said. Their research shows that 28% of the people that they surveyed are what they call infrequent listeners. 28% of the general public really doesn't care very much about music. Certainly doesn't care any more than it would take to flip on the radio. And then they say, another 23% on top of that basically our radio listeners. And that's pretty much that's their engagement
So
level
a full
with music.
50% are passives, at
Yeah.
least, and
There
that
you go.
number may be low.
There
Well,
you
that's,
go.
and that's so to answer the question. That's why I agree. My opinion is that Pandora, starting with Pandora and working backward to an on-demand solution is actually a really realistic way of looking at the future of streaming music, as opposed to say Spotify up, right? I think if you look at Pandora and Pandora's huge growth and Pandora's distribution growth, now they're going to be in every car that comes out in a couple years' time. And if you think about adding an on-demand service to that for that 50% of people who do care, you end up with a pretty interesting model.
So I'm going to jump in and sort of throw out another part of this, which is that some of the trade-offs that artists take with some of the streamlining process. What's your phrase, Jim? Faster?
Faster, easier, and simpler. We've
Faster,
got to
easier,
make
and
it
simpler.
faster, easier, and simpler to pay for music in hopes that when it is, more people will. Today,
Well-
it's extraordinarily difficult, whether you're a consumer or whether you are an entrepreneur.
So faster, easier, simpler is the sort of trade-off is a loss of control, because the artists lose in some situations, the artists lose the ability to say no to things, the ability to control some of the places and the platforms that their music appears on. Dina, we just chatted about this a bit. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm all for this, subscription service, whatever you can put it on, whether it's on your eyeglasses, like Jim says, on your mobile phone. We have to get it simpler, easier, faster. But the problem is in the artist community where the issue stems is the derivative work, the loss of control. So being able to take somebody's song, putting it on a cell phone, whatever, that's fine. You're using that song in the way the artist did that song, performed that song, recorded that song, but where you put it on in a movie or in a TV show or in a commercial, in a game, to lose the permission, to lose control where the artist, loses the right to grant permission for that, I think is a really big issue. And listen, this whole issue with where we're going in the music industry, it's a freaking disaster. I'm not gonna lie, it's a disaster. And we don't even get along within the music community. So the two copyrights, we have the sound recording copyright and the musical composition copyright, we don't even like each other. The two copyrights fight, okay? And within the copyrights, they fight. All right, so the sound recording copyright, the record company hates the producers, the artist hates the record company, the producers are mad at the artist because they're not getting paid, and the artist pays the producers, but the record company pays them as an accommodation through a letter of direction. It's a nightmare. And on the musical composition side, they all hate each other. They're all fighting over copyright splits, and the publishers are trying to poach other songwriters from other publishers, and it's just a nightmare. So that's one issue that we have to overcome within ourselves because we eat our young, okay? The other thing, too, that I want to say in the music industry, I want to say this because it's really important. A fan's emotional affiliation with a piece of music will always take precedent over mundane legal concerns. Okay? These social and personal behaviors will not change, but they can be monetized. This is how we have to focus together to make this work. So all of the things that I'm hearing today, I don't necessarily disagree with. I actually agree with a lot of what Jim Griffin says. Contrary to public, public opinion, he and I agree on a lot, except for the issue of control. That's where we don't agree.
But let's go to the heart of it. I mean, if Pandora wins, it's because they have a compulsory. Spotify isn't even licensed in the United States.
Back up for the audience's edification. Why is Pandora under, what is,
Well,
tell us
Pandora
it's
takes advantage of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, which gives them a compulsory license over the use of all music when they're delivering in the United States, whereas Spotify is waiting for permission. And so the reason Pandora is winning this battle right now is that they are in existence, and they are only in existence. They are only playing the Beatles. They are only playing certain artists that would never give them permission, Dina, and I think you'd agree, you would never get permission. And Spotify hasn't gotten permission in the United States because they don't have a compulsory license available to them. Pandora does, and the only reason they can take advantage of the compulsory is that when you ask for a song, that's the one song they won't play you.
Right.
But Spotify will, and so that can't be licensed.
So just to sort of simplify it,
It's an irony.
Pandora feels like it's on demand and interactive, but it's not. It's considered a non-interactive webcasting company. So they don't have to go and get direct licenses from publishers
Right.
and sound recording copyright owners? Right. It's all under the compulsory.
It's automatic.
Right.
Well, the publishers are never a problem because, of
Yes.
course, ASCAP and BMI must give you a license. If you ask for one, you can debate the price. The sound recording is the issue. And with Pandora, their business proposition is that you ask us for a song, and we'll play you the song we think you should have asked for if you knew as much about music as we do. Spotify, on the other hand, says, no, we'll play you what you want. Spotify's illegal in the United States. Pandora is completely legal and endorsed by the law.
See, I don't think that artists, you know, and especially I'm talking on behalf of my clients, I don't believe that they would have a problem with that, okay? That's not where the issue is. The issue is where you take it and you make it a derivative, where you use it, you mash it up, you put it in a film, you put it in a TV show. That's more of the issue, but I don't think that that's a big issue,
But Dina,
Jim.
the problem becomes even asking your clients. In other words, just the burden of having to go to every conceivable sound recording and publishing owner. And our best agencies know where 40% of them are.
Yeah, but if
That's
you're
as
talking,
good as we can do is define 4 and 10.
Let me just, before you guys come to blows here.
No, we love
as,
each other.
As the person, I mean, let me answer that question because I think derivatives is a fascinating issue. And actually, YouTube is the heartland of this issue. And let me just say that I think one of the things that YouTube has been very successful at doing is making artists and performers and rights holders understand the value of what copyright owners call derivative works, but in reality, what everybody out there in the world calls really awesome user-generated content, right? How many people here have seen or heard about the JK wedding video? Yeah, so the JK wedding video, for those who haven't seen it on YouTube, was just a wedding. People were shooting a video of their wedding, and they did this really creative thing where they danced their way down the aisle to a Chris Brown song, right? And that song was a year old. It was basically, you know, ancient history in the pop charts. But that video, it has so much energy, it's so fantastic, and has inspired so many other people to do similar things.
There's a difference.
It put that Chris Brown song back on the iTunes top 10 charts, right? And I agree, there is a difference.
There's a difference because it's fan-based. It's user-generated content.
No,
That's the artist fans.
No, the difference, that is not the difference. Copyright law does not say
Correct.
that derivative work is different when it's done by
but
fans.
If you're talking about changing the current broken model, I'm all about listening to change,
And
okay?
what I'm saying is because YouTube has a content ID system that lets the label, the rights holder of that Chris Brown song, basically be open to the possibility of fan-based creativity and get compensated for it, that song had a new life. That wedding got to do what they did and put it on YouTube. That was a win-win for everybody. And I hope it encourages more creators. Again, if you want to choose Content ID and say block, Content ID supports that. But by doing it, we're hoping to basically show artists that derivative works are good for them. They're good for fans.
Sometimes taking a Sarah McLachlan song and putting it in a movie, okay, when she never does that, is her right, you know, and then all of a sudden to get rid of that, where all of a sudden she's watching the screen and she sees her song being used in some horrible scene that she didn't appreciate, that's more of my problem.
I don't think anybody's talking about taking that right away from creators.
So then that would be a good thing. So wait, can I just ask Fred one thing?
Yep.
So explain it then. So you're only talking about as far as derivative works, you want a compulsory for user-generated content?
That's not at all what I said.
Tell me
What
what you
I
said.
said is we need systems that basically create a way for artists who want to have fan-supported creativity to feel secure to do that. And frankly, I think that's exactly what YouTube has accomplished, right? YouTube has deals with all of the major labels and an increasing number of independent labels. Basically says you can go ahead and put any video you want to that music. And when it goes up, that's monetized, ads show up, both parties get, you know, YouTube takes a piece, artists get most of it. That's great. So it seems to me that's what we need more of. We need more, we can sit here and wait for a compulsory license for the rest of our lives. But in the meantime, there's a lot of people making videos out there that are great, and they want to use music they love. So I'm saying let's find more ways to make that happen. And on that score, we probably ought to talk about exactly what Jim was mentioning, how hard it is to clear rights, because that's what's standing in the way.
So we'll get to that in a second, but I want to have Chuck weigh in
I was
here.
going to say, aren't we talking about how can you make It Takes a Nation of Millions again, a record that you can't even buy
Right.
because of the samples?
You can make it. You just got to find different ways to try to get it across. And I had a discussion with one of my #1 producers in the studio, and he just had to chalk it up. He says, "I'm tired of this. I'm drawing a line because now all of a sudden every creator thinks that they're a manufacturer. So now we've gone from creator into manufacturer. So now you have people, since they're manufacturing, figuring into it, we got to figure out what it is. You got an audio file, basically. And when people ask me, I say, well, Chuck, what are you listening to? And I say, I got 15,000 songs on a damn iPod. What kind of conversations do you want me to give you? So I think, Jim is just, by making it simple, it's better and we can go from there. But I just think that increasingly as we go into the future, the fact that it's just the audio file makes you look at it a little differently than you looked at it in 1987 or 1971. It's so many different aspects of multimedia going out. You don't see people trying to put a movie into a song. They put a song into a movie because the film industry seems to have itself organized to the point and monetized from the A to the Z. But when it comes down to music, sometimes we have to just kind of be free spirit and keep a creative mode about us and not try to let it get it always into the lawyer's hands. But it's a push and pull type of thing. And I got into it from necessity. I got tired of the, we're gonna be a record company, but you got to go to us first before it gets out into the world. And I said, there's got to be a way I could get out into the world and have you guys talk about it later. That was it was the necessity of it, because I couldn't even, and Tommy would know, I had product that couldn't leave the building, so that I was accrued costs for. So here I'm like accrued these costs, and I can't leave the building, and you guys are stopping my shit. So here we are, fast forward into 2010. I know it has to be some kind of push and pull, but we're talking about an audio file here in a time where people could download gigs. Or the other day I saw, terabyte in the palm of your hand. I'm like, what the fuck are we talking about now?
Yeah. I've heard this phrase before too. How do we have, this is I think Jim Griffin's phrase, how do we have people pay for music when payment is now optional?
It's voluntary.
Voluntary. So, okay, so let's push it up a little bit more. I mean, do IS?
The thing I just want to add, I'm like, we have to also understand that it has to be some sort of creative mode considered in this, because why would people pay for something that they can do themselves? This is what, since a lot of creators have come into the marketplace, it's like, why would I pay for somebody when I'm a better guitarist and I've made my own recording? Fuck the recording guy with the record company. There's no way that this guy or this rapper is better than me. And so when everything becomes even Steven, then there's no kind of really, there's no way to judge who's better and what's better, because this is how music has gone for so long. I mean, in Tommy's, 80s, of course, it's like, you know what? You really feel fortunate to be able to get into a studio, so therefore that sets your bar kind of high, because you got into the studio and you went through a process that released this manufactured material out in the marketplace, so therefore that kept you away from somebody who was just doing it on the corner. But now, since everybody has the ability to manufacture, why would somebody pay for somebody that they're better than? Even when it comes down to shows, why would somebody pay for a performance from somebody that they feel that they're better than the person on stage? And this is what separates music from sports, because you can say that you're better than the Washington Wizards, but the closer you get to that court, you realize you can't do that shit. And that's why sports, sports keeps the bar so high from the fan that they keep the AWE into audience. I don't think the AWE is in the audience of music lovers right now.
Well, okay, so
That's why
Maybe
Dina's so
we should have
successful, by
fantasy
the way.
music, like they have fantasy football and baseball, fantasy league
yeah,
music.
rock band.
So that they can really get involved. Everyone can have their own label. They can sign their own roster. We can compete and have a chart.
This brings us to something I think both Ian and Tom have done a lot of thinking and talking about. Is 1,000 fans enough? Is it, can you live without a label? I mean, these are things that people have talked about for the past 5 to 10 years, both of them. 1,000 fans is all you need. You don't need a label.
Well, I think we've seen it. We've seen it both work and not work.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think what Chuck is saying is right, but I actually love it. I mean, I think in the future, quality is hyper efficient, right? We don't have to be, we don't have to be served by the gatekeepers. We get to be the gatekeepers. And I think the other great thing is you're building these direct connections between the audience and the artist. So if the value proposition is right, and the value proposition probably does need to be more than just a compressed file, right? If that's 1,000 fans for sure isn't enough, if all you have is this compressed file. But the types of bands that we're seeing be successful right now, I think are bands. It's not really 1,000 fans, but for us, it's been really interesting to watch bands like Yesayer, Beach House, these kind of bands that have come up relatively recently. And when you talk to their manager about the old music business, he just gives you a blank stare. Like, I don't give a shit about SoundScan. I don't give, he's building a good business for these artists on relatively small fan bases. Records that sell between 50 and 150,000 copies. Joint ventures with labels who help him with promotion and marketing because he's a small operation and he's cash strapped, by doing fair 50-50 deals, good touring bases, and so what you're seeing is it might not be 1,000 fans, but it's a small number of fans relatively speaking, but pretty healthy businesses, multi-million-dollar a year businesses.
I'd like to build what Ian was saying just for 1 second, just in one sentence. Come on, this is 2010 and everybody feels that they can rap, right? So the biggest question is, like, even if you got 20 fans, 20 people, if they're fanatical about your stuff, my question is how can you become the #1 fan of your #1 fan? That's the biggest, that's the question for the next 4 or 5 years. Can you become the #1 fan of your #1 fan? Stalk your fans. So even if you got 10 people, it's about the quality. It ain't about the quantity, and then you could build from there. If you just think that you're going to just have this mass populace of people that love you, and that's going to hold, I don't think that's going to work.
Yeah.
Can you become a fan of your fan?
Well, I think also it's about knowing and connecting with that audience, whoever they are. I just spoke with John Forte about a week ago about this, where he's been sort of rebuilding his career. I don't know if you're familiar with John, but you can look him up and see his whole story, which is really interesting. But he's been rebuilding his career over the past 2 years. And what he said the other night that I thought was really interesting is he went out thinking that his fans would be the fans who he had before, which are fans of the Fugees, and which he was a part of. And he's really found that going out and doing TED Talks and playing for a bunch of I'm trying to think of how he put it, but he's playing for a lot of wealthy folks who want to hear his story, he's sort of found an odd niche, which is not who he thought it would be. But to Chuck's point, I think if you know your audience and find really target and go after, and I think that's actually when Yesayer and Beach House, the most interesting thing about talking to their manager about how he's built those bands is definitely about knowing audience and giving them things that they want and value. And I think that kind of sums up where it needs to go, generally speaking. Right.
So Tom, how has the independent labels' role changed? I mean,
let's just talk about labels for a second. Most people don't understand what labels are. I think you have to look at labels have 2 functions. One, they're the venture capitalist, they're the investor. And that may be their most important role, and maybe always was. The other part is that they're the operator. They're the people who deal with monetizing the creation through distribution and accounting and legal and marketing and promotion and all of the other stuff that they do. They try to maximize the value to generate the most money and keep a piece of it and give some of that to the artist. And the argument always is, what's the piece and are they doing enough? But the reality is, if you look at a venture capitalist in any other business, if you have a startup company, that VC may take 50 to 75% of that company for an investment, and they look for a 10-to-1 return. So when they have a hit business, they expect 1 hit to pay for 10 stiffs, basically. In the music business, at the best of it, in the golden years of the 80s, 1 hit may be paid, and I'm talking about a mega hit, may be paid for 5 stiffs. Now 1 hit doesn't even pay for 1 stiff. It doesn't even pay for 0.5 stiffs because the return is so shitty that nobody would want to invest in music.
It doesn't even pay for the hit.
It hardly even pays. I mean, you have records that go
true.
gold and platinum that lose money, and,
Right.
and it's become more and more routine because the margin has been creeping away and disappearing over time. This is really one of the things that's hurting the development of artists because labels, major or independent, no longer taking chances on exciting new artists that they hear and feel in their heart are great. They have to see it on paper. That artist has to be going 30 to 50 miles an hour for them to even consider it. And then they'll give them a shitty deal, and they'll take a 360 anyway to try to increase their back end, but they're going to spend 1/10 of what they used to spend because they have to cover their nut and keep everything low. They already have 70% less people working for them than they used to, the labels. So they do 70% less than they used to do when we used to complain about it. So you can do it yourself. Do you need a label? You need the money. I think if you can break without money, break. But it's really, really hard. You need two things to break as an artist. You need a team of people who do certain things. All those things we mentioned, especially exposure. An artist needs to get exposure, and they need a team of people who are going to focus on how can we get exposure, because you have to find your audience, whether it's a small audience or a big audience, and you have to tune into it because a lot of artists don't get it right the first time. We had Naughty by Nature when they were new style. We rejected them when they came to us. They had an album out on another label that sold nothing. Everlast had an album on Warner's that sold nothing. They dropped them right away. Then we picked up House of Pain. You just don't know when an artist is, And on the other hand, we had Prince Rakim, who turned into RZA, which became Wu-Tang. And we dropped him because his single didn't react. And, you can only invest so much for so long before you have to say, that's it, we've used up our budget, and the next guy might have a better shot. We've had tons of shots like that. So what is a label? You're a label. Every artist is a label. They just have to get money and expertise and put it all together, because if you're really an artist, you're writing, you're gigging, you're improving your skills, you're connecting with your fans on some level and understanding who they are, you're making your story better and improving yourself. You're not spending all this time marketing, promoting yourself, doing distribution and all that other stuff. That's not really, an artist is an artist.
Yeah,
So they need somebody to do that. That's one of the reasons why you started your company.
Yeah, no, I would agree, and we see it all the time. It's funny because we get cast Topspin, which is really a software platform, but we get cast as this as a sort of an anti-label, something you can use to go around your label, but nobody really sees the value of a label or just someone helping you do promotions and marketing as much as we do, because we see a lot of people who will use our software and they put up a page somewhere with some buy buttons on it and they go, oh, I'm gonna be rich now, and it's like a tree falling in the woods with no one around to hear it, right? So you definitely need first of all, to both your points, you have to have something that anyone cares about, right? Because quality is hyper efficient. So if you don't have something that moves people, you have a worse chance than ever of having it get anywhere. But if you have something that people love, and then you can, whether it's a label or somebody else, you for sure need people to help you market and promote it, and you do probably need an investor of some sort.
Well, I'd like to also ask a question, Tom, because this, the backward downward spiral started a long time ago in music, when you saw this drive to go national, forsake the local ability of an artist being able to take care of their quad state or tri-state area, to make a living in their area, it sell to their area, and also having the areas of radio before it became, deregulated. You had a local vibe that really fueled the local artists to be able to do in their own area without thinking that they have to go national. Then once the majors and all these big companies want to say, you know what, this has to be a national act because we got to get these numbers, and no longer 10,000 units good, because that doesn't feed us. So therefore, the disappearing of local and the quest for national, and even the quest further for international, did that actually, pull the rug up under the companies, I would say, the hold on what music should have been in the first place? Because I tell artists all the time that work with me, I'm like, don't think about selling something to Seattle if you sell an MP3. You live in Atlanta, you can't get to Seattle. You can get to Alabama, you could get to Florida, you could drive there and get back home. So you can probably make your money in performance art there, But the problem is that their art isn't supported locally. So you have a local station that's a national station, and they're playing somebody from New York so they could sell to them on a national basis. So therefore, the way it should work, it's like, you know what, you got local stations, and a person could go bit by bit, and therefore make a living in a 2 to 3 state area and have and grow from there.
Right.
Well, you know, let me just, it's interesting to hear you say that, because I remember reading an article about Jonathan Colton, who's done very well online, and he actually makes an interesting kind of 21st century variant on that story. He says, because of the internet, I can find fans nationally.
Internationally.
Exactly. And he says, he goes online and he says, I want a tour. Asks his fans, where should I tour? And he basically says, if you can promise me, you know, if I can get 75, 100 people in a particular town who say they're willing to come out and see me if I go there, that's where I tour. He lets the fans basically dictate his tour.
Get back home.
Well, exactly. It has to be enough money, but the key is, if you can promise a venue that I'm absolutely sure I can get 100 people in the door, I've got their names right here, we're ready to go, you can actually do a lot better, and you don't have to just think about the sort of 3 states around you. You can start thinking about, well, you know, there's that town out there, and I've got a fan base, and nobody else ever goes and tours there because it's a little town in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah,
but if I show up, people are going to come out. I know 100 people are going to come, and probably because nobody else tours there, I'll probably get 100 more because they've got nothing else to do on Friday night.
Yeah, Fred brings a great point, and in fact, there's a panel right after this one about, you know, the American investment in actual cultural communities, and I think that would be a great point for them to sort of discuss, and actually how the internet is facilitating that. I wanted to actually sort of tag onto that and talk about whether the proposition for musicians has changed too.